What's up, YouTube? It's your boy JP on the keys, and it's too easy. We're back in the video today, and I wanted to go back into the history because we haven't done the history in a long time. Because I've literally just been thinking to myself, and like this right here is extremely relevant, considering Russia. And I'm probably going to talk for a little bit, so if you want to just watch the reaction, I'll have a timestamp. I'm not going to talk for too long, maybe like 2 or 3 minutes. But the recent story about like Iran banning the internet like really brought about a lot of thought in me, because Russia is so important as a country because of its history of just political unrest. Like Russia has had an extensive history of political unrest, of violence, overthrowing the governmental change. Like this is stuff that we're really not used to in the United States. Like, when was the last time in the United States you heard of a small group coming together and literally overthrowing the government? Like, that hasn't happened in the history of the United States. Never. But also, this is important because I feel like Russia, they'll always have people will always look at Russia, because you got to think about it. Russia was involved. We were involved in a 45-year nuclear standoff with Russia that dominated the entire 20th century, literally. Because it was just this anti-Russian propaganda in the United States. And I'm sure in Russia, it was a lot of anti-Western propaganda. And you see now when Putin speaks, he talks about how the people in the West are trying to ban certain language. They're trying to make things, you know what I'm saying? All this Western hatred. Not even just that. In that era, I know they weren't the first to establish communism, but they made it popular. They made it a global phenomenon. Now it was other dictators that were adopting this communist philosophy. Think about this. Fidel Castro was literally in Cuba, a communist country that's literally right on America's doorstep. And it's like the banning, like, those types of governments is why people fight so hard for free speech. People fight so hard for for all freedom of all speech. Because once you start trying to deny people rights and you're trying to make people think a certain way and believe a certain way, and you can't say these certain things, like you're encroaching on people's rights, and it's not helping anybody, because you're just turning into a totalitarian state. Because it's, we're banning this certain language. Like look at North Korea. North Korea is isolated from the rest of the world. Like, all their news is North Korean news. All their television programs are propaganda for North Korea. Like, these people are being brainwashed into believing that North Korea is literally superior to every country in the world. That it's really the only country. Think about that. Those type of totalitarian governments. Rather than trying to cancel these types of things, why don't we learn about them? Why don't we find out why people think this way? Why don't we try to delve deeper into it to get a better understanding? You feel what I'm saying? That's why I always hate it when people try to ban, like when I react to Love Thy Neighbor. Why are you trying to ban racist programs? What quote unquote racist programs? Why can't you look into it and see what it is? It might be uncomfortable, but I'd rather face reality than live in some type of augmented reality. I shall never agree to a representative form of government because I consider it harmful to the people whom God has entrusted to my care. Okay.
In 1894, Nicholas II became ruler of a Russian empire that stretched from the Baltic to the Pacific, inhabited by 126 million people from 194 ethnic groups. It was a country in which workers and peasants lived in poverty and hardship, while Russia's elite, its imperial family and aristocracy, lived lives of gilded luxury.
Which is why I hate this divide where it's like, oh, this racial, it's not a racial divide. It's never been this race against this race. It's classism. Classism is at the center of all this. Like, these people are the same race. All these people are Russian. But it's classism that separates them. Think about this. The people who don't have the resources are living in squalor and terrible environments, but yet the elite are in formidable conditions and living better. It's classism, bro. It's between those who have and those who don't. It's not about race. It's never been about race. It might have been for a small period of time, but the real issue was classism. Really.
There was a long history of struggle in Russia against the injustices of the system. And in 1905, a revolution forced the Tsar to allow the creation of a State Duma, or National Assembly. But its power was limited, and the compromise pleased neither the Tsar nor the reformers. In 1914, this divided empire was plunged into fresh crisis by World War.
What is all this talk about the people's confidence? Let the people merit my confidence. You feel what I mean? Like this absolute totalitarian government to where your opinion is better than everyone else's because you feel like you have the best interests of your country.
World War I was a disaster for Tsarist Russia. At the front, the country suffered a series of devastating defeat chaos. The Tsar was held responsible for the crisis.
Of course.
After all, he was now the army's commander-in-chief,
You're the leader, why
and
not?
he was standing in the way of government reform. His German-born wife, Empress Alexandra, was even thought to be supporting Germany, while the entire family was said to have fallen under the spell of a Siberian mystic and faith healer,
Ivan the Terrible.
Grigory Rasputin.
Oh, Rasputin. I say Ivan. Rasputin.
In December 1916, Rasputin was murdered by Russian aristocrats, possibly with the help of British secret agents, both groups determined to end his influence over the Tsar. But in the eyes of many, the damage had already been done.
Situation serious. There is anarchy in the capital, government paralyzed, chaotic shooting in the streets. Okay.
On the 23rd of February 1917, thousands of women took to the streets of the Russian capital, Petrograd, to mark International Women's Day and protest over bread shortages.
But I find it wild how Russia went from a government controlled by czars and kings to communism. So it really didn't. So this revolution didn't really solve anything because now it's just a different form of totalitarianism. Just now the government controls media, and I guess it's with democratic elections now. Apparently, it's just authoritarian, just a dictatorship with elections, with some type of government body.
The next day, they were joined on the streets by workers and students carrying placards that read, "Down with the Tsar." Troops ordered to put down the disorder mutinied and joined the protesters instead. Tsarist officials were arrested. Prisons and police stations were attacked. Emblems of Tsarist rule smashed and burned. The government had lost control of the capital. The Tsar was told by his ministers that order could only be restored and Russia saved from military defeat if he gave up power. So, on the 2nd of March, Nicholas agreed to abdicate. In just 10 days, 300 years of Romanov rule had come to an end.
The provisional government does not possess any real power. Not really.
The February Revolution had been remarkably swift and bloodless, and hopes were now high for the creation of a more democratic, more just Russian state. Members of the State Duma, the National Assembly, had formed a provisional government, which was to hold power until a constituent assembly was elected, to give Russia a new constitution. But in reality, the provisional government shared power with the Petrograd Soviet, a council elected by workers and soldiers that controlled the capital's troops, transport, and communications. The Petrograd Soviet, dominated by the Socialist Revolutionary Party and the Marxist Menshevik Party, was much more radical than the provisional government. Yet it supported the government's decision to continue the war and honor the commitments that Russia had made to the Allies. It was a fateful decision that ultimately played into the hands of one of the smaller parties, the Bolsheviks. Their leader, Vladimir Lenin, recently returned from 16 years in exile, bitterly opposed the imperialist war. He also demanded the immediate redistribution of land, from rich landowners to peasants, and the transfer of power from the bourgeois provisional government to the people's soviets or councils that were springing up across Russia. The Bolshevik program was summed up in a simple slogan: bread, peace, and land. And as Russia's economic and military crisis deepened, its appeal to the masses grew and grew.
They took advantage of the situation, though. Our tactics, absolute distrust, no support for the provisional government.
In June, a new Russian military offensive ended in disaster, with 400,000 Russian casualties, massive desertions, and the collapse of army morale and discipline. In July, soldiers and sailors in Petrograd mutinied. They were joined in the streets by workers with Bolshevik support. But troops loyal to the provisional government opened fire on the protesters and dispersed the crowds. A police crackdown followed, leading to the arrest of several Bolshevik leaders, including Leon Trotsky, while Lenin, with the help of Joseph Stalin, fled to Finland, traveling with forged papers under the name of Konstantin Ivanov. A socialist and stirring orator named Alexander Kerensky became Russia's new prime minister and was hailed as the man who would save Russia from anarchy.
Hang the German supporters and spies with Lenin at their head and disperse the Soviet.
The army's commander-in-chief, General Kornilov, believed Russia's war effort was being undermined by chaos at home and deliberately sabotaged by men like Lenin, whom he declared a German spy. So in August, he ordered his men to march on Petrograd to restore order. Bolsheviks played a leading role in the city's defense against this attempted military coup. Their most brilliant organizer, Leon Trotsky, was released from prison and sent armed Bolshevik militias, the Red Guards, to defend key points in the city.
Wait, so the Bolsheviks stood up against the provisional government, then people from they stood up. So the provisional government was was basically a way to oppose the totalitarian rule of czars. Then the Bolsheviks come to oppose the provisional government. Then here comes Kerensky to come after the Bolsheviks now because of their stance against provisional government. It's just several back and forths, and it's just it's interesting to think about just all this political unrest and just Like, it's just stuff to dive deep into. Like, I'm a history nerd. I like information. I like learning about stuff. You know, like I literally watch documentaries on Netflix. That's really all I watch.
Strikes by railway workers, many of them Bolshevik supporters, prevented Kornilov from moving his men by rail, and his soldiers began to switch sides, or simply go home. The Kornilov affair cast the Bolsheviks as saviors of the revolution. And by the end of September, they'd gained a majority in the Petrograd Soviet. In October, Lenin decided the time had come. He secretly returned from Finland to Petrograd and began preparing to seize power.
It would be naive to wait for a formal majority for the Bolsheviks. No revolution ever waits for that. History will not forgive us if we do not assume power now. I understand this mindset. Like, what's the point of waiting for a vote? And they thought, what's the point of waiting for a majority rule or a vote? Like, if we're going to do this, why not do it now? Why it's already a point of limbo and not wait for people that could sway the vote to actually decide against us? You know? Yeah.
On the 25th of October, the Bolsheviks made their move. Red Guards and loyal troops seized key points around the capital, and that night they stormed the provisional government's headquarters at the Winter Palace, an event later immortalized by Bolshevik propaganda and the great Soviet filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein.
See what I'm saying? Information. People, like, these people understand. Why do you think they banned the internet? Why do you think they try to control information? Because they know that controlling access to information and controlling what people see and what people hear is, like, vital to controlling them. Because you're not going to rally as many people as you probably did if you don't have propaganda about your cause all over the place. If you don't try to crowd people's minds with your ideology. You know what I'm saying? Like, this, and it still happens today. Like, people use the media and social media, internet, to kind of control how people think. Why do you think commercials for, like, politicians are? They try to tell you all the good about this candidate and all the bad about other candidates. You never heard about the bad things that the candidate that has a commercial is doing. It's just one-sided advertising.
Kerensky fled the city at the last moment, narrowly avoiding capture. And the next day, at the Second All-Russian Congress of Soviets, Lenin announced the overthrow of the provisional government.
If we are not ready to shoot a saboteur and white guard, what sort of revolution is that? Nothing but talk in a bowl of mush. Wow.
The following months saw the Bolsheviks consolidate their hold on power, while fighting a brutal civil war against counter-revolutionary, or White Russian, forces who had foreign support. Some whites hoped to put Tsar Nicholas back on the throne. After his abdication, Nicholas and his family had been held under guard at Tsarskoye Selo, outside Petrograd, where they occupied themselves with gardening and other diversions. In summer 1917, the family was sent to Tobolsk in Siberia, where they lived under house arrest in the governor's mansion. The following spring, the Bolsheviks had the family moved to Yekaterinburg. In July 1918, as white forces approached the city, Bolshevik soldiers gathered the whole family in a cellar. The Tsar, his wife, their son Alexei, their 4 daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, as well as 4 servants, and executed them all. Russia's Civil War was one of the 20th century's most devastating events. An estimated 2 million soldiers lost their lives, while a typhus epidemic and famine claimed the lives of a further 9 million civilians. By the end of 1921, the Bolsheviks had emerged victorious, and under Lenin's determined and uncompromising leadership, set about building a new socialist order. The Soviet Union, created in 1922, emerged as a world superpower following the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. But it would always remain a single-party state, where all opposition or dissent was ruthlessly suppressed.
So what was the point? Like, you literally protested one form of government to literally install the same form of government that was there. that's what...
Those brief hopes for Russian democracy that flowered amid the euphoria of the February Revolution were extinguished by the Bolshevik October Revolution.
Maybe that was a lie. Maybe that was a ploy to get people to understand. Maybe that was a ploy. Maybe because they knew that people were against it. They say, well, we're gonna bring elections and stuff, and now it's back to what we had before.
And put beyond reach for decades to come. Bridgman images are the
all right, I don't know. I like this video. This video really stoked a lot of this like thought out of me, because I've always thought like it's like what's really better for a country, having a absolute power dictator, or we have elections where we switch out the members every few years or so. What? Like, my thing is like you have democratic elections. My thing is, you never know what type of tactics people could use to get the public opinion. They can pay for newspapers and pay for advertising. And also, like, people come in and install their own form of government. And if you're only in for a certain amount of time, you're going to try really hard to get what you got to get installed. Because look at what Barack Obama did with all the Obamacare. He did all that stuff 8 years to develop that system, and then Donald Trump comes in and literally dismantles the entire thing. That's like the inconsistency. That's like really inconsistent. I don't like the inconsistency that like somebody could be relying on a program, and now all of a sudden, since a new president is in, now the program doesn't exist anymore, or now they're trying to reverse everything that the last person did to try to do what they want. And then you got this one where the same guy is in power for 30 years and now it's an oppressive regime and we can't do anything about it. Like, it's always the enigma about this. Like, it's always been like a weird thing of like, how do we decide who rules us? How do we decide how much power do these people have? You know what I'm saying? It's always good to look into this stuff. But thank you so much for supporting. I might have talked a lot. I probably talked y'all head off during this video. I'm sorry. But like the video, leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you want me to do some more history stuff, because I high-key want to do more history stuff as well, because I feel like I love talking about this stuff, you know. I'm working on a Where Are They Now for In-Betweeners, so that'll be out pretty soon this week. And I also will be back with all my regularly scheduled uploads, like, you know, On the Buses, Only Fools and Horses, Love Thy Neighbor, Rise and Damn, all the shows that I usually do. But I always kind of want to switch it up every week. Give a couple different videos than what I usually put out, just to see how people like them. But thank you. My Twitch stream. My Twitch will be in the description as well. I'm probably going to Twitch tonight. I'm going to stream tonight. So stay on the lookout for that. And check out my Discord and my gaming channel in the description as well. Thank you so much. Please be safe. Stay on the grind. Have a great day. I'm out. Peace.